Another day, another recap. Today we'll be diving into the brand new action thriller crime movie titled The Killer. Enjoy the recap. The movie kicks off on Chapter 1 located in Paris. An assassin sits staring out of a window. His timer goes off and he almost falls asleep. Sometime later he awakens still parched outside the window, but he's wearing some gloves though. The assassin does not have any names. He's known as The Killer. He sits back on his chair and puts in some earphones. He waits and then looks outside and just watches people going about their daily life. And I guess it's time for some yoga. Some push-ups and a great sitting posture doesn't hurt. He finally leaves the room. Going down a couple flights of stairs, he exits the building with shades and a hat before scanning a bike with his phone. He quickly grabs some much-needed supplies from a nearby cafe and jumps on a phone call with a man on the other line saying the person will show up. The killer says he's waited 5 days and he's going to wait only 2 more. He quickly heads back up to the building and a narrator speaks. The killer says he refuses to book any more Airbnbs from their hidden nanny cams. He continues watching the everyday people, and when night approaches he sets up his sniper rifle staring right out the window. Out of nowhere, someone behind him opens the door to the room. The killer holds his sniper at the ready, and a man drops off some mail and walks off. The killer caught a close call, and when dawn finally breaks he still sits at the window. He illustrates how boredom is one of the hardest things a person can do in their lifetime. His line of work is boring up to the point where he stages accidents or gradual poisons, causing his creativity to kick into place. He continues his day by disinfecting the sink and afterwards ends up in his makeshift bed. The killer goes to have a power nap, to which he sets his alarm every so often to wake up and check if his target has arrived. But during one peep he spots curtains being opened up at his target's location. A car then pulls up in front, and a housemaid prepares the chambers for a VIP on his way there. The killer sets up his sniper rifle once more and sees a man inside the house. After loading the bullets he raises his bed to window level and spots more people entering the building. The maid greets more of her guests and the killer chucks in his earphones and spots a woman being guided to a room. He follows to chuck on his hoodie and says a mad quote,
"I don't give up."
The killer then sits with his earphones in, watching the man until his watch alerts him to his heart rate. He looks back at his scope and spots his target coming into view with his window. He gives himself a speech about morals and whatnot, which actually drops his heart rate. The target's wife is also in the room, and when the killer fires the shot, he misses his target. The guards shut the blinds and the killer now has to pack up all of his weapons. He quickly dons a motorcycle helmet and runs towards his scooter. He jumps on and speeds away as cops approach from all areas. As he drives, he dumps his gun in the garbage truck on the street and continues driving away. But soon enough he spots police swarming the streets. He pulls a Jason Bourne tactic on the stairs and continues going through alleys and just managing to avoid police. He ends up stopping his bike at the bottom of stairs and climbs them. He tosses his helmet and makes his way to the nastiest public toilets. Nowhere else but the gas station has claimed that title. After giving himself a little makeover, he goes to a nearby cab and makes his way to an airport. But problematically, while in line, he spots a Belgian Malinois and turns the other way. He cleans himself up, gets a plane ticket, and goes to the phone booth. He tells the man on the other side what happened and makes his way on the plane, where he spots an ominous-looking man. Some while later, the killer arrives at his location and stares at the same man. He then hears on the speakers that the flight has a delayed option available and a voucher plus accommodation to wait a day. He accepts the trade and successfully makes his way to his hotel room. He places a glass cup on the door handle and sits on the couch. The following day he silently exits his hotel and makes his way to his next flight. He puts in his earphones and cruises through the sky. At his next destination he jumps into his car and goes from place to place and through some beautiful scenery. He pulls up to a gate but spots boot marks on the floor, and this prompts him to grab a pistol and jump the gate. He goes sprinting until he sees more boot tracks and runs up to the mansion. He makes his way inside and then he sees blood all around the house. He makes a call and immediately rushes towards a hospital that's having some power outages. He sees a woman lying in bed and Marcus tells the killer that she's in critical condition. He explains to him that his sister Magdala described the 2 people that attacked her and said there was a woman and a man, but she managed to stab the man and hide in a bathroom. Marcus believes the 2 people came for the killer but found his wife instead. The killer follows this by sitting next to the bed and Magdala wakes up. She tells him she did not utter a single word about him even under the immense pressure they put her under. With that he leaves the hospital and gets to some digging. He opens a hidden underground safe and the next day begins packing his bags. He sets out on a drive through town and spots the description of the vehicle that left his house. When night approaches, he asks if he can grab an emergency driver, but when they open the door for him, well, let's just say he goes looking through their database until he finds the driver he's looking for. He sends a package through the mail to Dolores and begins staking out a location. He spots the driver he's been looking for and tails him until he asks for a ride. During the ride, the killer taps his pistol on the glass and the driver hands over his wallet. But the killer doesn't want money, he asks for information. The boy knows exactly who he's talking about and calls the two he escorted freaks. He gives the killer the description and says he was pretty much forced to drive them. He says the story of how he took them to a hidden mansion and was forced to wait until they returned. But the killer could not care less and kills the driver. Using another fake passport, he leaves the country and heads to New Orleans, taking a stop at a storage facility to park his van, get some guns, files, and a new number plate. With his new work vehicle, some power tools seem useful, and even a banana. The killer spots a specific woman and calls her Dolores. It seems it's time to execute his plans as he fakes to be a garbage man and enters the building. After arriving on his level, he starts counting in his head how long the door takes to close. He approaches the door and drinks from a bubbler. Once the opportunity presents itself, he manages to keep the glass door open, and when the woman sees him, she is petrified. The killer holds her and then holds Hodges at gunpoint. The man seems to recognize the killer as well as his line of work and tells Dolores to comply with his demands. After locking her in the bathroom, Hodges says that he was forced to make consequences happen when the killer missed the shot against a very powerful man. Hodges seems to be one of the leaders that the killer was working for and offers him the only solution for survival: to disappear. Hodges goes into a backstory saying he brought everything from the ground up, but the killer wants to know where his backups are. Hodges says there is nothing and that he will not dare to harm him. But Hodges is mistaken and is shot in the chest by a nail gun. The Equalizer would be proud of him. But anyways, the killer says Hodges has 6 minutes to save himself but dies on the spot, and the killer's timing was way off. He heads to kill Dolores but quickly finds out that she knows the names he's looking for. She will only provide them on the condition that he promises to not leave things looking the wrong way. He approaches her and his mind tells him empathy is weakness, but he doesn't listen to the voice and cuts her free. But problematically, she sees Hodges and passes out, after the killer chucks Hodges into the garbage can. The scene cuts to later that night where Dolores is taken for a drive. When they stop and the killer exits the van, she screams and tries to escape, but that ain't happening. She eventually helps him go through all the files to find the subcontractors who broke into his house. He only finds a name, Claiborne, the client. Once finished, he psychotically kills Dolores and complains about having to always clean up. He is one psychopath, and he inevitably makes his way to a motel to catch some sleep. After cleaning his van and grabbing a bite, there's not much else to do than to head to Florida. He arrives at the address provided earlier, and spots some men at the location. As night approaches, the killer spots the men from earlier leaving. He decides to follow them, and sees one of the men heading back to his house. He approaches the fence and spots a massive dog barking at him. He tosses it some food which it eats and runs back to its owner. He once again patiently waits, but this time enters the property when the dog isn't present. He stealthily walks around to find the dog napping and continues until he walks in the house through the front door. The man inside is having a shower, and the killer creeps to the bathroom and hears the knobs turning. He gives himself another speech but is ran into by a man who quickly shows the killer how tough he actually is. When the killer is pinned to the ground, he gets back up, but their fight rages on and breaks everything around the house. After the killer breaks multiple items on the man's face, he puts him in a chokehold, but the man escapes and the two continue breaking everything they see in sight. The man reaches for a gun but is injured in the process. The killer arms himself with whatever he can find and hides behind a door. The man approaching is bleeding out and walks towards the final door until the killer finds a pistol, injures the man and then finishes him off. He then sprints for his life when the dog chases him, and when he's safe, he throws a Molotov to burn the house and cover his tracks. The following day, he makes his way to the airport once again. He boards his next flight and travels to New York City. This time he uses public transport and goes to rent a car for himself. Soon enough, he arrives at the subcontractor's supposed house and watches it like he watched the others. He takes a much-needed rest and waits till nighttime, where he spots a woman with the same description the taxi driver had told him from earlier. As soon as she starts driving, the killer quickly follows. Making sure to keep some distance, the radio plays as the time ticks. The woman goes to turn right and the killer jumps in the left lane to finish the job but hears sirens in the distance and stops. He keeps following the car, and when it stops, so does his. Seems she's made her way to the waterfront and is having a really fancy meal. He goes back into talking to himself mode and soon enough forcefully takes a seat at her table and aims his gun at her. For a killer, she buckles quite a bit, She introduces herself as the expert and asks the killer if he finally gave Hodges a horrific death. As the killer remains quiet, the expert tries to use some friendly tactics and offer him food. Another tactic she tries is by telling him that she had nothing to do with hurting his wife, it was the brute who done everything. But the killer already took care of him, and as your usual psychopath, he just stares at his next victim while she blabbers about morality and the hypocrisy of their work. She also tells him that he could have killed her in so many ways but chose to talk to her. With that, he takes her outside and makes her walk as she blabbers and tries to use reverse psychology and even fakes to break her leg, but the killer just shoots her clean in the head. Now the killer isn't finished his hunt quite yet, and looks for his next victim. With such a high-class profile, this job isn't going to be that easy. He stakes out the man's residence and heads up the car park when he sees an opportunity. Running into a door handle that won't open, the killer simply searches a fob copier on Amazon and spots his target sitting in the car. At night, he links up with a man selling him some weapons and has whatever a psycho could wish for. After receiving his Amazon delivery, the killer goes to the gym where his target trains at. After swiping the janitor's card and going inside the change rooms, he finds his target walking off to work out. Using the janitor's card, the target's locker opens, and the killer takes a card from a wallet inside. Using the device he bought earlier, he copies the card and promptly returns it to the target's wallet. With that, he waits until the gate opens for the building car park and uses the card he had created to open the door. Using the nearby elevator, the killer heads up to level 27 and walks right into the billionaire's abode. The man chooses between which bottle he wants to drink and gets scared once he sees the killer. Claiborne has no idea who the killer is and offers money, but when the gun is pointed at him, he almost begs until the killer asks him if there is a problem between each other. Claiborne is over the top confused, but quickly realizes what's going on when he sees the card that the killer showed him. He explains to him that after he missed the shot, Hodges recommended that insurance must take place and the killer be removed. Claiborne uses his billionaire's golden tongue and genuinely tells the killer he has no issue or problem with him. The killer tells him that if he has to come back, he will give him a slow and painful death. After that, he simply walks out of the room and to the street. In his final destination, he heads to the Dominican Republic where he enjoys a nice cup of tea with his now healed wife. And that's the end. If you have any recommendations or videos you'd like recapped, smash them down in the comments below, and as always, see you on the next one.